recorded in Little Italy, Louisiana. Welcome to Pinstripe Alley, the official Mobcast with a.k.a. Fanene.
Ladies and gentlemen, wise guys and made men alike, welcome to the first ever Pinstripe Alley official Mobcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really want to start out by saying I appreciate the support from everyone who has supported my cause, my work, my literature, my two titles that have already been released from my Gatekeepers series, Gatekeepers Part 1, and then Gatekeepers Entry 2, Warm Barrels, Cold Blood. Everyone that's purchased a copy, that has given a review, that has kept those books, especially the first one, at 5 stars on Amazon. Thank you guys so much for that. I appreciate it. That means a lot to me because, you know, that's like my passion. So I've been trying to follow that. And so every time that someone buys a book or reads it, or even just tells me they like it, it goes a long way to me. So thank you so much for your support. And thanks for joining me today because on my first podcast today, I think that we should talk about getting into the mafia, getting into the steps it takes to get into the mafia. How do you get in? You know, is there a certain application you fill out? Like, what do you do? There are several preliminaries that you do have to go through, and we're going to get into those right now. So, jumping right into it, the first thing you have to do is something that you really can't even help. To be in the mafia, you actually have to be 100% Sicilian. 100% Sicilian. On top of that, you have to have the papers that prove you're 100% Sicilian, birth certificate, you know, whatever it is. You know, it has to prove that you are a Sicilian. So that is a major rule. It's a major thing that was followed, I would say, on up to maybe the 80s or 90s. I don't know. Don't quote me on that because that's not a good assumption, but or a good approximation. But I would say the majority of the time that the mafia existed, everyone in the mafia was 100% Sicilian. It's just something. It's a code they live by. They were able to keep them closer. You know, it was really just a way of life. You know, for them, it's like a massive fraternity, and that's one of the major aspects of it is you have to be 100% Sicilian. So if you're in like Flynn. The next major thing that you have to go through is you have to prove yourself. In order to prove yourself, you have to start out at a low rank, and the lowest rank you can be when working with the mob is an associate. And an associate is someone who isn't a made man. And a made man is somebody who is completely in with the mob. It means they are tied to the mob with their life. And like I said, I'll get to that in a minute too. But these people that are made, like before they're made, they start out as an associate, which means you're not tied to the mob. But you and the mob, you work with the mob works with you. The entire point of the relationship is the mob making money, and usually more than you. You just get your cut, but it is what it is. So that's part of being an associate. When you start out, you do small things for them, gain some trust. But the truth is, after doing a lot of research, listening to several mobsters who have come forward to do interviews, honestly, the best way to let a mob family know that you are in complete allegiance to them is it's to kill somebody. That there's no way around it. You got to pop somebody in order to join the family usually. That's the best way to let the boss, the capos or captains in the family, to let everybody know that you are really about the life that you have apparently chosen. So boom, you kill somebody. So we'll say, that's what happens. So you graduate before you can graduate, you have to have a ceremony. But you essentially, once the ceremony is planned, you essentially graduate to what is called a soldier. But before you become a soldier, you have to have a special ceremony. And it's a ceremony that is held in a secluded place. In most accounts, it's in a secluded, dark place, only illuminated by candlelight. So many men from the family are gathered inside of the secluded place in the dark. And what happens is they all gather here and they wait. And you're contacted. And you're told to, dress up, be ready. They tell you where to go. They tell you to come to this certain place, to this secret area. When you do finally arrive to this secret area, however you get there, you enter in and you are greeted by someone in the family. Now, granted, the person in the family could be the boss, could be a captain. Most of the time, it's the boss. They greet you, and the ceremony begins. The lights are low. He comes to you. He basically says, is this really, now is the time to turn back if you don't feel like you don't want to be, in this thing of ours. If you don't want to be in our fraternity, our family of crime, you don't want to do it, now's the time to turn back, because once we do this, it's over. There's only one way out. I mean, you could other than prison, the only way out is in a box, is death. You are tied to this until death, and it's an oath that they hold truer than anything. It's a way of life they abide by that is more prevalent in their life than anything. Family, their mothers. This fraternity was so important to them. It was such, attribute of their life, of their personality. It ruled everything. And so this is what they were trying to convey. They were trying to say, once you take this oath, that's it. So once you take the oath, they ask you, it's like, are you sure? You say yes. They ask you, do you know why you're here tonight? Then this is directly from Michael Francis. He basically said, do you know why you're here tonight? And you say no. And everyone laughs in the room because obviously you know why you're there. And so everyone laughs, and that died down, he said. And then the ceremony continues. And like I'm going by, most accounts that I have read about or heard someone speak about. So basically there's a table or a mantle or something, depending on how it's set up. And they pull a veil back or a sheet, whatever's covering, and underneath the sheet is a gun and a knife sitting side by side. And they ask the candidate in question, they say, if there ever came a time when you needed to use one of these, would you be able to do it? If there ever came a time when you had to use one of these to kill someone, would you be able to do it? And the candidate answers yes. And they say, well, that's the right answer, obviously, right? So they, cover the gun up or leave it out, whatever. They come forward and they take their hand. They're like, extend your hand forward. Tell the candidate to extend their hand. And then, the mafia, the boss takes the hand and, withdraws a blade, sharp object, a pen, something like that. Anything to draw blood with, and they prick the index finger. And when he pricks the candidate's index finger, the blood's dripping down on the floor. They're explained to them basically just how final, for lack of a better words, just how final that this thing is, because they basically say, you tonight are reborn. You're a new man. This is new. This is everything that you've known before comes to an end tonight. If your mother is dying, and this is also something that Michael Francis said, which he's definitely worth checking out on YouTube. Great YouTube channel from Michael Francis. He is a previous capo for the Colombo family. He was a capo in the Colombo family, was not a cooperating witness, and he's still alive. Probably the only member of La Cosa Nostra, or a.k.a. the American Mafia, still alive, who did not rat and is not dead. So definitely worth checking out. But anyway, I digress. But he did say, he explained,
Tonight you're a new man. If your mother is sick and dying, and we call upon you during this time, you will leave your mother's side and you will come and serve us. If your children are sick, if your children are in danger or they're dying, and we call you, you will leave that situation. You will leave your family in danger, and you will come and work for us. You will do our bidding over all else. This is the oath you're taking tonight. This is, and as the blood drip, this is the information that the candidate is being fed. They stand and listen, and after the blood, drips for a moment, they give the speech and speak a little more. Then the boss withdraws a card, and it's a card, a Catholic holy saint. A picture of them is upon the card, and they light one of the corners of the card, and they tell the candidate, "Cup your hands." And the candidate cups their hands, their fingers still blood everywhere, probably. But they grip their hands and they put the card while it's lit on fire, and they say, "Now juggle this back and forth in your hands." So the candidate is now more or less juggling the card back and forth, trying to avoid being burned by the card that is rapidly being consumed by the fire. They're juggling it back and forth, and while they're doing it, the boss now makes this proclamation and says, this is, like I said in the beginning, this is more of my paraphrase of what basically it's said, but it's the main idea. And the main idea is they basically tell the candidate, as this card burns within your hands right now, that you juggle back and forth, so shall your soul burn in hell should you ever betray this family. Should you ever turn your back on this family, this is what will become of your soul. You will burn. You will lose everything. And more or less that's the truth, because if you do turn your back on the family or become a marked man, there's very little place you could have run, especially in the 70s, from the mafia. I would think it was safe to say in the majority of areas that there was really nowhere you could go, that they couldn't find you. That's the kind of grip that they had on this country. But that's for another podcast. But once you do this, once you have your finger pricked, you go through the long lectures and all those things, and after that's all over with, and you juggle the card back and forth, and it's all flaming, and you can fully understand that you're about to sell your soul. You fully understand that it's about to be over. The boss tells you to clap your hands together, rub your hands together with the flaming card in the middle to put out the flame. If it's still burning, who gives a shit? You bear the pain. You rub your hands together, and you look back, and there's ash and soot all over your hands, and you look like you've been digging in a fireplace, and the boss looks at the candidate and says, "Congratulations, you are now part of the family." And everyone in the room claps, and everyone's happy, and there's this spirit of joy, and so on and so forth. And then there's a heavy, large, they gallantly celebrate afterwards. There is, the finest food, the finest wine. There's just a huge eating. Probably some female entertainment. Who knows? And once this happens, this ceremony alone, this small amount of time, is enough time for someone's life to be basically completely over. And I think that it is interesting to me. I find it just mind-boggling that this way of life, this way of life that was passed down, la Cosa Nostra. I don't know if I said this before, but la Cosa Nostra is what they referred to their mafia. The mafia, people inside the mob referred to the mob as la Cosa Nostra, which is Italian for this thing of ours. They wanted to keep it secretive, and rightfully so. But it blows my mind. I always try to pick apart the psyche of whoever, in very strange situations such as this. And I find this situation strange because this ceremony alone and all of these things, this way of life, is enough to make someone do 20 years for a cause. It makes them, they'll do 20, 30 years. They serve the rest of their life in prison. They were offered time off. They were offered, and I know there's probably people thinking, yeah, you don't want to be a rat, but it's like, you really got to put yourself in that position. I'm not saying that being a rat is the best thing to do ever. I hope I'm never in that situation, but I mean, when it comes to, things like that, you just have to really look at the devotion that these men had to La Cosa Nostra, to this thing of theirs. They were willing to give that much of their life up for the simple oath that they took, and that is something that it's no different. I called it a fraternity. I refer to it as just a massive fraternity. I refer to it as a family of business, but it's almost like a cult, because once you're inside of, these walls of the mob, you immediately begin to, or you begin to adapt, to these ways of life that desensitize you. You begin to do these, you have to perform these sociopathic acts. You have to do it. I mean, it's something that if you're called upon to do, it has to be done. And truthfully, I'm kind of getting off subject here, but I just think that to willfully trade your life off for a life of wealth or a life of, expensive automobiles, which are all great. I'm not going to sit here and say that it's not. I think the thought of having all that that's not bad. But in the psyche of some, it's an honor to step into that light and completely, have total disregard for the law, and the only manner of business is some form of racketeering, some form of illegal gambling, some form of extortion, collection of protection money. It's the list goes on of how the money and the funds were acquired and allocated by the mafia. And that's definitely something that I'll go in a future podcast without question, because that's going to take an entire podcast to cover. So getting into the mafia, for all of these things to happen, before you can even, get to that point, you really have to know someone on the level. And as explained by FBI agent Joe Pistone, a.k.a. Donnie Brasco, he explains that you are not going to be able to just walk into the mob. You're not going to be able to go to a mob hangout where people were hanging out. He was there in the 70s. You can't just go to a mob hangout where they are and just start talking and say, hey, I want to be in the mob. I want to, that's not how it goes. That could be dangerous. It's definitely going to be counterproductive to your cause if you're an undercover FBI agent. And that is something that he knew since he was already prior street guy. So in order for you to even get to that point, it's good for someone to be in a spot for a long amount of time, and then you have to be kind of brought into the circle. The way that Joe Pistone or Donnie Brasco was brought into the circle is he just waited at this bar, this hangout for 6 months, and finally made some form of contact with the bartender there, and afterwards was invited to a card game right after, illegal card game, and then the rest is history. And that's also something else that I'll cover in a future podcast. So just to let you know, there's a lot to talk about in the Mafia. That's why I'm pretty sure this series is going to be going on for a while. That's just a little introduction into what this podcast is going to be about. It's going to be a lot of good information, I feel like, and I'm going to convey it to you the best way I know how, and hopefully you enjoy it. And also, once again, cheap plug, if you haven't already, make sure you guys check out my books. Make sure you give them a look. 5 stars on Amazon, great reviews. Check out the reviews on Amazon. I think you're going to be impressed. If you're a mob head, if you're listening to this podcast, you must be a mob head. So if you enjoy the Mafia, if you enjoy the lore, if you enjoy action, if you enjoy suspense, a lot of thrilling, it's you have to check out my book. It's called The Gatekeepers. And it's available on Amazon, and it's available on Kindle, and soon it's going to be available at just about every store. It's going to be available at 40,000 locations. So the Gatekeeper series, there's already Gatekeepers. It's the first book called just the Gatekeepers. Excuse me. Look at me. I can't even speak on my own podcast. What am I good for, huh? The Gatekeepers by a.p. Fanene. A.p. Fanene, which is me. I'm that guy. The Gatekeepers, and then the second Gatekeepers book, The Gatekeepers Entry 2, Warm Barrels, Cold Blood. Make sure you check those two out if you are a Mafia fan. I promise you, the prologue alone, at least by the first book, will have you interested. That's just how much faith I have in it. So, thank you guys so much. Thank you for hanging out with me today. Like I said, this is a mini podcast. The next podcast is going to be full. I'm going to run about the full hour or approximately somewhere there. So, more content to come. Thank you guys so much. Hope you have a great day, and I will see you next time.